Good evening, everyone. Hello, hello. Oh, hit my drawer. Sorry about that. How is everyone tonight? Mary Jo and Chloe? Paula K? Deidre? Is Deidre here? I see somebody saying hi to Deidre. Good evening, good evening. I started just a little bit early tonight. Good evening. Make sure I turn down my iPad so I don't... There we go. It is now springtime, as you can see. Oh, she'll probably stop back. She was probably just seeing if I was on yet. She most likely will come back. Oh, Mary Jo's on her TV. Hello, hello, hello. We are going to be reading chapter 21 and 22, and ooh, I'm kind of excited. No, I'm real excited. Who am I kidding? Ha! I am in love with this book. But we are first going to do today's prayer. Before we get started, I'm just a few minutes early, but that's all right. They'll see me on and come on in. Today's prayer. Hope you guys can see that. Today's prayer is, teach us, number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Wow, that is Psalms 90:12. Well, that kind of touches, doesn't it? Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Beautiful, beautiful prayer for today. I love that. All right, let's get started. Chapter 21. I do hope you all love the spring bouquets that I have with Miss Victoria there in her beautiful spring dress. I have another outfit for her I might put on her too. I think that would be really pretty with the spring bouquet, and her other dress would look lovely with it. Chapter 21. Libby walked into the Good Yarn 15 minutes after 10. She didn't want to appear overly eager, but she was excited about talking to Ava. It had taken real courage for the teenager to contact her. While the progress had been slow, she could see that they were making headway. "Morning," Libby greeted as she entered the store. Her gaze automatically went to the back of the shop, where Casey and Ava generally hung out. The table was empty. "I'm so glad you're here early," Lydia said, coming around the front counter and taking Libby's hands in her own. Dark shadows appeared under her eyes, as though she hadn't slept well at all. "Lydia, what happened?" The other one looked like she was about to break into tears. "Oh, Libby, I think I made a terrible mistake." She started toward the back of the store and into the office where she kept a microwave. She filled the teapot with water and set it inside. Then pushed the button to heat the water. "I'll feel better with a cup of tea." She automatically brought down 2 cups. "Where are Casey and Ava?" The pregnant teenager had told Libby she would be at the yarn store on Tuesday, and now there was no evidence of either girl. "Oh, I know. Ava was at the house yesterday afternoon," Lydia explained. "She stayed in Casey's bedroom most of the day, crying her eyes out." "Why? What happened?" Libby was immediately alarmed. "I think your talk with her The day you took her to lunch? Yes. Did I do anything to upset Ava? No, it wasn't anything you did. Frankly, I don't think Ava realized she was pregnant until you told her. Ah, I was afraid of that. Clearly, Ava was several months along, and in discussing the matter with Philip, he thought she might even be heading into her 8th month. The baby must be growing and moving. And now she's frightened to death. Her bigger feat isn't for her own well-being or even that of the baby. She seems more concerned about what her grandmother will do once she finds out. Oh no, Libby felt dreadful and wondered what she could do to help. Casey pleaded with me to go over to Ava's grandmother's house and talk to her, Lydia continued. Casey was convinced that once Darlene Carmichael knew about the baby, the worst would be over. She thought Ava could then get the medical attention she needs. All the poor girl could do was worry about hiding the pregnancy from her grandmother. Libby already knew what was coming. You told the grandmother, didn't you? I tried. It wasn't a job I relished. I talked it over with Brad, and we both felt I could probably be the one. Ava trusts you, and you never met Darlene Carmichael, and we thought she'd probably take the news better from me than from someone she never met. Libby agreed. How'd it go? The microwave beeped and Lydia shook her head. I doubt it could have gone much worse. Oh dear. Lydia removed the teapot and then added 2 tea bags, which allowed it to steep. Carrying the ceramic pot to the table, she set it down next to the empty cups. Oh, Libby, you can't imagine how awful it was, Lydia said. I bought a plate of cookies, and if I hadn't, I don't think Darlene would have ever let me in the house. Ava mentioned that her grandmother is upset because she thinks she's getting fat, so that was the way I approached her. Libby nodded, hoping to encourage her. When I suggested there is a reason Ava had gained all that weight and what I suspected, she dragged Ava out into the room and asked her outright if she was pregnant or not. What did Ava say? She denied it. Really, who could blame her? I probably would have done the same thing. In other words, the grandmother refused to believe it. Lydia nodded, her brown eyes round and sad. She claimed Ava was just fat and that I was a busybody, and she basically threatened me if I started spreading rumors about her granddaughter sleeping around. Oh, Lydia. Libby felt dreadful for her friend and for Ava. I don't think the worst of it is through. What do you mean? Lydia sat down and poured them each a cup of tea. The steam coming from the cups, her hand lingered on the teapot as she set it back down on the table. This morning, Casey phoned Ava to tell her we were on our way to pick her up so she would be ready when we got there. And Libby feared she already knew what was coming. Ava said she couldn't come. Her grandmother won't let her leave anything more to do with me and Casey. At first, Libby was at a loss for words. But as Lydia had said, Ava trusted her. Maybe I should stop by her house this morning. Perhaps if she talked to Ava, reassured her that everything would work out, then the teenager might agree to pay for the visit to the doctor. She would talk to Sharon first and get a recommendation for a female obstetrician from her. Libby's own was male, but she felt Ava might be more comfortable with a woman. Normally, she would have asked Philip. He was the first person who popped into her mind, but she couldn't. She wouldn't allow herself to do that. Still, he remained constantly in her thoughts. "Would you be willing to go see Ava?" Lydia asked. "I would feel so much better if you did." "Of course." She sipped her tea and brought out her knitting. When Libby was this upset, putting her hand to work calmed her. She wasn't sure how this newly developed habit would play out in the office when dealing with a client. The thought of her reaching out for her knitting in the middle of a legal discussion produced a smile. "I just feel terrible," Lydia murmured, elbows at her sides, holding her teacup with both hands. "You did what you could," Libby assured her. "I doubt it would have gone any better, no matter who told Ava's grandmother. While she might choose to deny that Ava is pregnant, she will be forced to acknowledge the truth soon enough." "But what happens until then?" The teenager wasn't Libby's biggest concern as well. "I'll do what I can to help her. I am so grateful." The bell above the door chimed, announcing a customer. Lydia helped the knitter, who was looking for alpaca yarn. She rang up the sale and then returned to the table. "Where's Casey today?" Libby asked. She liked talking to Lydia's daughter. Perhaps she could learn something from her. Lydia reached for her own knitting. "She's with my mother. Casey and my mother have a special bond. Our daughter never knew any of her grandparents before we adopted her, and she loves listening to my mother's stories. She simply enjoys spending time with Mom. And it's good for my mother, too. I do worry, though. She let the rest fade." "Worry?" "My mother's health is failing, and I can't help being concerned how Casey will deal with us once Mom dies." Her voice cracked as the last half of that comment came in a whisper, as if she had a difficult time facing the possibility of life without her mother. "Don't borrow trouble," Libby suggested. This was something her own mother had told her. "There's enough to handle for today. We don't need to take on worries of another day." Lydia's hands rested in her lap. "You're right." The back door that led to the alley where the staff parked opened, and Margaret came in the store. She smiled when she saw Libby. After the greetings all around, Margaret tucked her purse away, grabbed a cup, and joined them at the table. Soon the three were chatting, occasionally interrupted by a customer. After hearing about the events of the night before, Margaret offered Lydia her own words of reassurance and basically said the same thing Libby had. It wouldn't have mattered who delivered the news. Darlene's reaction would have been the same. "Ava will listen to you," Margaret assured Libby. "She looks up to you." Libby appreciated the encouragement. She needed it. Libby remained at the store until lunchtime. "I'll get something to eat and take it over to Ava's with me," she said. She would bring a green salad and fresh fruit. As she gathered her knitting and her purse, she experienced a wave of affection for those two women who had become her friends. For Libby to have spent 2 hours in the yarn store, visiting with Lydia and Margaret, would have been completely unheard of only a few short months ago. Once her law off, she probably wouldn't find the time to do it often. She hadn't taken a lot of time in the past 10 years to cultivate friendships. There simply weren't enough hours in a day to work as long and hard as she did and still have time for a social life. Her new friends gave her a sense of belonging and community. Libby knew she could discuss her troubles with Lydia and Margaret, and they would listen, really listen, because they cared and wanted what was best for her. Making friends hadn't been an overnight, but gradually, as extended herself, she found connections with others. By being open, she had been the one to receive this precious gift of friendship. There was Sharon Jennings from the hospital, and Libby had connected Abby Higginbotham in HR. They had met for coffee in the hospital cafeteria a couple of times and had laughed together. And Philip, too. Her spirits faltered as she thought about him, not that he was ever far from her mind. Philip had been another surprise, but instead of appreciating him for the gift he was, she had blown it, which was fairly typical of most of her relationships with men. She had no one to blame but herself, but this time she felt deep regret, an even deeper sense of loss. She couldn't help wondering if it was too late to make things right with him. She would like to try, but was afraid. On her way out the door of the good yarn, Libby checked her cell to be sure she hadn't inadvertently missed Sarah's call. The paralegal had said she would get back to her about the job after she had spoken to her husband. Libby expected her phone call at any time. No calls. Surely she'd hear from Sarah by the end of the day. After stopping by the French cafe for 2 takeout lunches, Libby got into her car and checked the address Lydia had given her for Ava's grandmother's house. She followed the tin voice from the navigator guide to Jefferson Street and parked in the front of a plain white house. The first thing she noticed was the yard needed mowing. Where once there had been flower beds, there was now nothing but tall weeds. The contrast between this house and the one next to it was striking. The lawn next door was well groomed with vibrant flowers hanging from baskets across the porch, and 2 boys sat on the front steps of the neighbor's house, one holding a basketball. Livy opened the car door and climbed out. She walked down the walkway leading to the front door and rang the doorbell. No one answered right away, so she knocked against the wood. One of the boys from the house next door ran across the lawn toward her. "Whatever you're selling, we ain't buying." Livy smiled at the youth, who looked to be 15, maybe slightly older. "I'm here to see Ava." "For what?" he demanded. He tucked the basketball under his arm and regarded her suspiciously. "I'm a friend of hers. Can you just tell Libby?" He broke into a smile, revealing slightly crooked teeth. "Are you the lady who took her to the restaurant lunch the other day?" "That's me." He relaxed right away. "Oh, hi, I'm Jackson, Ava's brother." "That's me," he said. "Come on in. I'll get Ava for you." He opened the front door and led the way into the house. "Hello, Katie. How are you tonight?" Hello, hello. I hope you're having a good evening. Ava, he shouted, you've got company. Libby stood in the middle of the living room and looked around. A empty beer can sat next to the overflowing ashtray by the recliner. Her attention went to the kitchen. The table still had dirty breakfast dishes on it, crusted bowls, and a cereal box, plus an empty milk container that was on its side. The sink appeared to be filled with unwashed dishes. The bedroom door opened, and Libby saw Ava walking toward her. Ava broke into a smile as soon as she saw her. Libby, what are you doing here? I thought we were going to meet up at the yarn store. The teen's face went slack. Grandma said I couldn't go there anymore. Oh dear. Then I guess that means I'll just have to come to you. Have you had lunch yet? Ava shook her head, and Jackson spoke. She didn't eat breakfast either. Instinctively, Libby knew why. If Ava stopped eating, she would lose weight, and her grandmother might not guess that she was pregnant. Oh, Ava, you need to eat. Grandma says she's getting fat, and she is, Jackson muttered. Doesn't seem right, though, because she barely eats anything. Libby resisted the urge to hug the poor girl. She wanted to help Ava, to protect her, but her options were limited. Would you like to go out for a while, Libby asked? To the park or waterfront? Ava's eyes brightened, and then just as quickly, she dropped her gaze. I can't. Grandma grounded me. What did you do? Nothing. She was mad because Casey's mom came to visit and she took it out on Ava, Jackson explained. I told her that wasn't fair, but then Grandma grounded me, too. A hint of a smile showed in Ava's eyes. Only Jackson ignored her. Grandma's at work, and she won't know if I go over to Peter's or not, right? He looked at Libby for confirmation. My father always knew, Libby said. I don't know how he did, but he did. Spyware, Jackson said. But Grandma can't afford any of that. Libby wasn't entirely sure what he was talking about, but she could guess spyware had something to do with hidden cameras watching every move she made. Libby doubted her father had any access to that type of technology when she was a teenager. Maybe, she said. I did bring lunch, though. Are you hungry? From the way Ava's eyes responded, Libby guessed that she was. Salad, she said, with dressing on the side. I guess that would be all right. Ava moved into the kitchen and started clearing off the table. I'm glad you did too, Katie. Thank you. I'll get out lunch and then we can talk, okay? Ava glanced toward her brother. Don't worry, I'll be with Peter, Jackson said. Ava visibly relaxed. Okay, she whispered, locking eyes with Libby. Lunch was only semi-successful. Ava was more frightened than ever, more so of her grandmother's reaction than what she called the baby in her stomach. No matter how persuasive Libby tried to be, she couldn't get Ava to agree to see a doctor for that her grandmother would find out. Do you know what you're going to do once the baby is born? Libby asked. Ava's answer was to hang her head. She didn't have an answer because she didn't know. Would the father be able to help you? No. Her response was immediate and flat, indicating that this was a subject she did not want to discuss. Up until this point, Libby had avoided the subject of the baby's father, wanting to build up the trust before him into the situation. If he's older than 18, I need to know, Libby said gently. Ava stood and backed away from the table. I think you should go now, before my grandmother comes home. Okay. Libby realized it was an excuse to avoid the subject. She hesitated, wishing she hadn't brought the subject of the baby's father so soon. A number of important issues needed to be discussed, including whether Ava continued to be sexually active. She packed up the lunch leftovers, afraid that if the girl's grandmother saw the takeout boxes, she would have guessed someone had stepped into the house. The next time they met, Libby was determined she would broach the subject more carefully. And that brings us to chapter 22. Oh my goodness. Oh, that poor girl is in a heck of a hoot. Yes, she is. I mean, she's deathly afraid of her grandmother. Um, she doesn't want to talk about the baby's father. It kind of makes you wonder what is going on here. But as we read chapter 22, maybe we'll get a little insight. We shall see. I'm going to take a quick drink break, and I'll be right back, y'all. Don't go nowhere. Okay. Oh, it's always helpful when you read to have a drink. And so we are going up on chapter 22. So what did Sarah tell you? Robin asked her as the two sat in the smoothie bar just outside the exercise room at the gym. This was a rare treat. Robin usually rushed out of the gym and headed for her office in the courthouse the minute she showered and changed clothes. Her suggestion that they have a fruit smoothie together had come as a pleasant surprise. I haven't heard from Sarah, Libby told her. What? Robin's gaze narrowed as she had been afraid of something like this. Libby was surprised herself. She expected Sarah to jump at her offer to get away from the oppression atmosphere at the office. As she had told Lydia, Sarah didn't appear to be the friend Libby had thought she was. Then write her off, Robin advised. Libby had more or less already done so, although she couldn't help thinking Sarah would have a change of heart. What was it so hard about eternal optimist? Libby didn't remember, but she couldn't help but hold out hope that Sarah would seriously consider the job offer. If it wasn't in the cards, then so be it. Well, it would have been great to work with Sarah again. Libby would do fine without her. Still, it stung. Really, all Sarah needed to do was pick up the phone and tell Libby she just didn't feel she could make the change. It wouldn't have been difficult. But to not call her back really said it all. The gal at the counter delivered the smoothies, and Libby took her first sip. She wasn't sure what to expect after reading the ingredient list. In addition to fresh fruit, the smoothie had a bunch of healthy, veggie-type goodies added: flaxseed, wheatgrass, and a couple of other items Libby had seriously considered eating till now. Hey, this tastes good, Robin sat back on her stool and cocked her eyebrows with a look of surprise. Thought day I voluntarily eat raw spinach. Me either, Libby agreed. If she had got the healthier, she would sprout grass on the top of her head. So, Robin said, stirring her smoothie with her straw, how's everything between you and Philip? Libby froze. Up until now, she had managed to avoid the subject of Philip. He hadn't been at the gym either. Her shoulders sank and she admitted, I'm not seeing him anymore. Robin's face revealed her shock. When did this happen? A week ago or so, after the interview. I told him he was a distraction. You did what? I know. Libby had been kicking herself ever since. Is that why he hasn't been at the gym? Libby wasn't entirely sure. Either he's avoiding me or he's on another rotation again. She had heard through the hospital grapevine that Philip planned to attend a charity tennis benefit to support a good cause and would be the organizer. Another doctor named Scott, oh, I don't like last names I can't pronounce, Scott Busber. I hope I pronounced that right, you guys. Scott Busber. Libby had debated attending the function and finding a seat close to him. The temptation was strong, but she hated to be so obvious. She hadn't seen him since that fateful afternoon. She was sorry she had acted so impulsively, and now she wasn't sure if it would ever be possible to repair the damage. She had come so far only to back away when it mattered most. The two of you had been seeing a lot of each other, hadn't you? They had found an excuse to be together almost every day. Well, no longer. Yeah, you're sorry. Oh, Robin, how could I have been so foolish? I feel dreadful. Then tell him that. Eat crow. Do what you have to, but just do it. Otherwise, you might regret it for the rest of your life. I'll think about it, Libby promised. And she would. Eventually, she would run into Philip. Either he was doing a masterful job of avoiding her, or the fates were conspiring against them. She supposed she could pick up the phone, too. But she held back. Fear had made her break it off with him in the first place. A fear she couldn't embrace new things and be a success. Also, fear of being hurt again when so much of her life was in the air. Robin went silent and kept her head lowered as she drew circles with her straw in the thick drink. Libby sipped her smoothie. She noticed lately that people tended to ask the very question they wanted others to ask them. It made her wonder what exactly was going on between Robin and Roy. Robin only rarely mentioned the judge, and it seemed like she was afraid what Libby might say if she did. What about you and what's his name again? Libby asked, playing dumb. Roy, isn't it? Rob shot up. Bullseye. What makes you ask? Libby played a nonchalant and shrugged. No reason. Robin stirred the smoothie and increased. I see him nearly every day. Fabulous. Yeah, it's fabulous, all right, Robin muttered. sarcastically, and set her drink on the counter before she slid off the stool. Listen, I need to run. See you. She stepped off the stool. Ready? Libby asked. Robin nodded. Libby didn't know what had happened between Robin and her judge, but apparently something must have happened for her friend to react that way. Philip wasn't at the gym the rest of the week. Friday morning, after working out with Robin, Libby showered and changed clothes and headed for the hospital to rock the babies. While she exchanged chit-chat with Sharon, she kept an eye out for Philip, hoping she would see him. Gathering her resolve, she planned to talk to him, tell him that she had made a mistake, and ask for a second chance. He didn't stop by. Until today, she had always felt better after spending time with the newborns. But her nerves were on edge, and the babies quickly up on her tension. Have you seen Dr. Stone this morning? Libby gathered her courage and asked Sharon when she couldn't stand it any longer. Sharon shook her head. Dr. Stone hasn't stopped by all week, and frankly, that surprises me. It didn't surprise Libby. He generally finds an excuse to visit the nursery on the days he's here. At one time, that had been true, but Libby expected that it wouldn't be any longer. After leaving the hospital, Libby returned to her condo. She didn't bother with lunch. She sat with her knitting for a short time and sorted through her feelings. After a while, she decided she was too numb and upset to feel much of anything other than the sadness of the loss of a promising relationship, a relationship she had single-handedly ruined. Philip Stone wasn't the only person on her mind. Libby decided to try contacting Sarah one last time. She used the number for the direct line, only it wasn't Sarah who answered. Hello, this is Libby Morgan, she said. Is Sarah available? I'm sorry, Sarah is out for the day. All right, thank you. Libby hung up the phone. She had Sarah's cell number, but she'd need to dig out her address book to locate it. After a couple of minutes, to compose her thoughts, Libby punched out the number for Sarah's cell. It rang 4 times and then went to voicemail. Hello, Sarah, she said, doing her best to sound upbeat and enthused. I haven't heard back from you. If I don't get word by Monday morning, I can only assume that you aren't interested in the job offer, which is completely fine. She disconnected and sat down. It felt as if she were struggling to swim upstream during a winter thaw. Sarah was a huge disappointment, but Libby would do fine without the paralegal. Her life was moving along just fine. Actually, more than fine. She had friends. She had prospects. She had a bright future, and Libby was determined to make the most of it. She looked down at her knitting once more and reached for it. Little did Sarah Matto realize that she had just walked away from the opportunity of a lifetime. It had taken courage to call Sarah. Now all she had to do was nerve to reach out to Philip. And we are 23. Oh my goodness. You know, so far in the last couple of chapters, we have learned of her regret about letting Philip go, which we discussed that in our book club meeting. We kind of knew just she didn't think that through. She just was like, "Oh, I messed up the interview. You gotta go. It's all your fault. I'm not giving enough attention to my life." And she just sprang it on him, you know. So I was kind of hoping in this chapter we would get that call in to Philip and see what's going to happen. We know that Robin and Libby now are friends again. Uh, Sarah's kind of in the air, but we kind of know where Sarah's going with this. And we still don't know if Libby is going to get back with Dr. Stone. So, guys, I will see you right here next Wednesday at 9 p.m. for chapters 23 and 24. And hopefully we will see if she has the nerve to get a hold of Dr. Philip Stone and make amends. And hopefully they will get back together. And what's going to happen to Ava? I hope we learn if Ava's in her 8th month, she's got to tell her grandmother. So I'm looking forward to that too. You all have a wonderful, wonderful night and sweet dreams. And I'll see you in another live. Good night, everyone.